This is my latest project. I spent about 2 months on it. It's the liebherr R926 compact excavator. I built it for the Eurobricks competition. It is built in 1:21 scale and has 7 motorized functions, while only using 4 motors, which are all in the undercarriage, between the tracks and in the tracks. The first function I want to discuss is the dozer blade at the front. It was later decided on to have a dozer blade because normally there is supposed to be an empty spot in the undercarriage, while now there are motors and a hub. So to kind of hide the motors, I decided to add a dozer blade, which adds another feature, so that's also a nice extra. It's really fun to drive around with and push away pieces. Here I'm cleaning up from another project which I did in between. You might see a video of that later on. It's pretty easy to master as it just uses 2 sliders on the sides of the phone screen, which uses the powered up app to control the vehicle. Unlike in one of my other projects, which I will show in another video, this one uses 1 motor per track, so it is very easy to control and very intuitive as well. It is pretty fast as it was geared for speed rather than torque, but it can still perform quite well even if it gets stuck. I will later on show you one scenario where it absolutely failed, but that was partially my mistake. Sometimes it's a bit hard to use the dozer blade as it tends to drive up on the pieces instead of pushing them away. Occasionally one piece slips underneath the dozer blade as well, and then it ends up pulling it back a bit. That's why you sometimes see me making very abrupt turns with the excavator to not pull it back all the way. Usually it's the thinner pieces because there's about a half stud gap underneath the dozer blade, which I was not able to fix, but I don't think that's a big problem, since most pieces are a full stud high, unless you're pushing away tiles or plates. But since you're watching this, I'm assuming you're more into Technic, so then it should be less of a problem. Now the ultimate test, can it dig? Of course it can, since this is the most important feature of an excavator. I really focused on this one. The arm uses 4 of the 7 motorized functions. There are 3 normal sized linear actuators and 1 larger one to control the stick. And the bucket is controlled by a pneumatic cylinder, since that was one of the main challenges of this build, making all these functions fit into this small machine. I designed a gearbox with 4 functions, which are selected by 1 motor and driven by the other motor, which are both behind the dozer blade. You might be asking, you have 4 motors, where did the other ones go? Well, there is 1 more in each track, but that still adds up to only 6 functions instead of 7. I didn't count wrong. Instead, there's a secret extra gearbox which I used, which is manually controlled, that I will show later in this video. One of the extra advantages of the pneumatics is that it sometimes, when normally a linear actuator would stall the motor, here it just builds up extra pressure until it's able to get the force it needs. As a result of that, it might be a little less strong, but significantly faster, since the other ones are more geared for strength than speed. So this is the fifth motorized function, the turning of the superstructure, which is achieved by a wormgear and an older type large turntable, because the wormgears for some reason don't work with the newer turntables. Before I used to directly drive it from the gearbox, but then if there was a lot of torque on one of the other functions, the superstructure would unexpectedly start spinning. So that's why I decided on using a worm reel, which did make it significantly slower, but also more controlled. But because before, if it got stuck, it would all of a sudden swing around very fast. But now it's a more controlled, precise function, which I think is nicer for this kind of application. So now I will show how to swap the batteries. It's very easy and convenient. Since the hub is located in the center, you can just pop off the lid, whether it's with screws or clips. You can decide yourself which one to buy when you decide to build this model. Then put the bundle back upright and then the batteries will fall out. Then you can swap them and put in a new set. And then after you put the lid back on, you can continue playing with the model like before, now with some extra power. The main feature of every excavator is of course the arm. This one has 3 sections, while most excavators have 2, so that was another challenge to get all the functions in there. The first section moves the entire arm up and down, and that is controlled by 2 medium linear actuators. There's one on each side. If you now switch the small manual gearbox, it switches to the third medium linear actuator, which is in the middle and controls the second section, which is usually in a normal excavator mounted together with the first section. Here it has some problems because it only uses one linear actuator, which is barely strong enough, so it is extremely slow. And here it still has the old design before I updated it. With the updated version, it now moves a little bit faster and there's less strain on the motor because I mounted the linear actuator a bit different. So more minor changes were made before instructions are published, but these are less important usually. If they are important, I will mention it later in the video. Here I switch back to the main boom movement, which is, as you can see, way faster and also quite a bit stronger. That is because the load is shared between the 2 linear actuators. By the way, all these operations are in real-time speed to really show you what the model is capable of. The 2 large linear actuators also had a minor change to the mounting position, which you might notice later in the video, and it even further increased its efficiency, so they are slightly faster at the end. You really have to push the gearbox the end because otherwise it might slip out of gear, but usually it stays in gear and does what it's supposed to do quite well. Here's the next function of the arm. The last part of the arm is called the stick and is operated by the extra large linear actuator on the top, which is driven by two U-joints, and then gears through the side of the arm goes to the superstructure. This was quite a difficult feature because in the lower half of the first section of the arm, the entire center is taken up by the linear actuator moving the second section of the arm. So it had to go around it, and I did that by using a lot of bevel gears. The last function on the arm is the bucket. This one is pneumatically operated because it was simply impossible to add even more drive lines through the arm. When the excavator is fully raised and stretched out, it can reach a maximum height of about 50 centimeters. That would look a little like this. To get the extra last bit of height, we activate the central linear actuator in the arm to really stretch the segments out all the way. This is the reason I decided to change the mounting position of the main linear actuators, because it had some trouble coming down and going up when it was fully stretched out. Now it no longer has this issue, so I'm really happy with that update. It is really a quite impressive model when it's fully stretched out like this, because now it takes up more than half a meter in length, while still being very compact in its other form when it's fully folded in. Here you can clearly see the linear actuators and motor struggling, because this one was before the update. At some point the motors even stalled because the linear actuators weren't mounted straight. So now onto the last function of the arm, the pneumatically operated bucket tilt. This entire section is located inside the cabin and uses a clutch gear or slipping gear to control the valve and as well as the pump in one rotational motion. Here on the side you can see the bucket moving back and forth. It uses a complex linkage at the end to get the maximal reach. I also decided to add a tilt rotator on the end of the boom. As you can see, it's all manually operated, but stays in place when you don't touch it. It can swing sideways as well as rotate 360 degrees. And of course, quick swap the bucket to any other attachment you can think of. The instructions come with 3 attachments: this bucket, a smaller bucket, and a pair of forks to lift up a pallet, which is also included in the instructions. You can switch the attachments simply by pulling out these 2 axles you can see here, which are both connected, so you can do this easily in a single motion. An extra spacer was used in the center of the tilt rotator to accommodate for the wider bucket. This is needed for both the large bucket and the forks, but needs to be removed for the smaller bucket. You can now see the pump and valve running in the background to get the exact angle we need on the attachment. As you can see, the controls are very precise and finely tuned to give you all the precision you could ever need with this machine. But of course you need a real excavator operator to properly do this, because I lack any experience, and of course I hit the attachment multiple times. But if you practice a couple of times, I bet you could get better at this than I am currently. So after a couple of misses, I finally come somewhat close to the attachment, and now you just have to stick in these two axles and it is firmly attached to the main machine. There's currently no option to have extra pneumatic functions on the attachment, but maybe this would be possible if you manage to add another valve somewhere. As you can see, the tilt rotator is not exactly in its central position. That is why the forks are slightly misaligned and not straight. Here you can see the pallet that comes with the instructions, along with a bit of load that does not come with them. But you can stack on there anything you would like. The pallet is the same as one of my other models, which is also available, which is a wheel loader. If you want to see more of my models, please give me a like, subscribe, and maybe go follow my Instagram page as well, since I post a lot more often there. Because it takes me a lot of effort and time to make videos like this, and I often lack that quite a bit, since I decide to spend it on Lego instead of making videos, even though I still enjoy this quite a bit. So now, after some skillful positioning of the attachment, I can drive under, which a real operator would probably never do, and just move the arm. And now pick up the pallet. So that's another mission successful, even on the first try. You can of course rotate the forks in any direction you want, so you can pick up pallets sideways or towards you, or even away from you like I'm doing now. The controls are really intuitive and use a touchscreen, which also comes with instructions to configure in the powered up app. Here you can see my attempt at digging with the smallest bucket it comes with. This is really useful when you are trying to dig a very small trench or something like that. But I don't advise using it outside with real sand. You will see later why. I tried it and it failed horribly because I didn't properly plan, of course, and I was coming up way too close to the deadline. While I was on vacation, I took this model with me to make instructions, so I quickly decided to try to shoot another video on the beach, but unfortunately there was a lot of wind on that day, and that was the only day we were close to the beach, so it horribly failed. I managed to get a couple pictures, but even that didn't work because there was sand in all the tracks and the motor got locked up because the gears were full of sand. But apart from that, I think the model does great. I'm really happy with its handling and performance overall. If you enjoyed the video so far, you can vote on this model for the Eurobricks competition 29, which this was built for. The link is in the description, as well as the link to the instructions, which I'm currently still working on. So that link will appear in the description later on too. Any type of support is really appreciated, whether that's through comments on what I could improve, likes, or subscribers. Anything is really appreciated. If you have any more questions or anything you want to know, even pictures are available on Eurobricks. Questions are welcome on the Eurobricks forum in the topic about this model, as well as in the comments. Once again, I would really like your vote for the Eurobricks competition.
Dat moet je zelf weten. Want als we dan een halve dag weg zijn, moet je die meenemen. En dat weegt dan weer veel. En dan is dat weer groot en onhandig.
Fucking hell, dude.
Die van jou is al maar de helft van die van je zus, hè? Ja, laat er niet op in, Helena. Want je maakt het ook erger door zo te vragen. Wat is dat echt? Jullie zijn moe, ik weet het. Maar dat is keigoed.
Here's a demonstration of the forks put to use. Here the pallet is lifted up to a rack. Very simple, built of a couple of frames and lift arms, and it can put the pallet up there quite easily.